So Kyle, it's so great to have you back. I'm so excited to talk to you about your journey of authorship. Kyle wrote this amazing book called Thank God for Depression: How to Make Depression the Best Thing That Ever Happened to You. Such an amazing book. And we're going to talk about the journey of like getting it to this form, right? Because everyone sees books in their finished form. We don't always know how we get there. So why don't you take us back to the moment when you first sensed that this was a book that wanted to be written? Do you want to take us there and kind of tell us what that was like?
Yeah. Um, the there's like one step before that, but
Yeah,
the
yeah.
seed that was planted that I could write something was I did the second medicine ceremony, ayahuasca ceremony I ever did. I had this vision, and she planted a seed where she's like, oh, she gave me the story of like there's a little garden in everyone's heart, and how to tend to that garden. And it was a kid's book, and two or 3 days later, I was like, "Oh wow!" Like she gave me like an idea for a kid's book. Like that's really cool. So then that was kind of the first thing of like it again. It created enough space to be like, "Huh, like could I write a kid's book?" And then it was like 2019, first month of 2020, right
Mhm.
before everything fell apart.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing with my life, and I had this idea that I like just healed my depression like months before, and then I had this idea of writing a blog, like, oh, 10 things to cure your depression now.
Yeah.
And I remember I went and sat down at a coffee shop in Venice or somewhere to write it, and the ADHD focus was so bad that I like did like 10, and I knew nothing about the writing process. And again, I had this idea where I was like, I'll sit down and it's going to be magic, just pouring from the page, and I'll get everything perfect, and in an hour I should have everything done. And like in an hour I felt stupid and dumb, and like this idea was horrible, and like I just like I felt bad about myself. And then but I got like 10 ideas, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then it just sat. And then, the pandemic hit, and then I did the artist way, which I think is right behind me. Like third time I did that, and didn't think anything of writing a book, didn't think anything of anything, like was just trying to, survive and do music and whatever. And then 6 months later, I'm sitting at Handlebar Coffee in Santa Barbara, and I'm journaling, and the blog came up again, and it was like I think I tried to approach the blog and write it, and then this like idea of insight came of like the reason you can't write the blog is because it's a book. And then I remember sitting up and being like, "Oh no, like I'm gonna write a book right now?" And then I was like, "Can I do that?" And then another thought came of like, "No one told you how to write songs. No one gave you permission for that." And like that turned out pretty well. So then I just did this thing that I always do of just like bootstrapping it. I bought. This is before your book was out, but if your book was out, I would have bought your book right away. But I bought this book called The Scribe Method, which was Tucker Max, and it just walks you through the entire process. I bought all these books about how to write, so like Stephen King's book, draft number 4, on writing well, like all these books from different sources I had of like, Tim Ferriss talking about how to be a better writer, and then Neil Strauss, who's another writer, he was writing an email chain about how to write a book because he was selling like a course about how to write books. So I emailed him, and it was like $25,000 to join, and I was like, okay, I'll bootstrap it, But he had this idea which I thought was really cool of like the book has intelligence. So it's like which I feel like that was songs, where it's like you're working with these breathing living things. So then the process for me was just like total chaos of just like getting everything out on the page, and then like organization. So it was like, I know that there's a lot of men that like to fetishize like productivity, and it's like with art, it's like the complete opposite of that for me. I'm just like make a mess, bathe in the chaos, like, and then there's a point where you're like, oh, I think I need to organize this, and then you make the organization, and then you're like, oh, I think I need to break that, and then you go back to the chaos and the trusting that like the book's going to tell you who it is.
Yeah.
So, and then when I first started, I couldn't sit for more than 10 or 15 minutes because like focus was so bad, didn't know how to write, so I was like really struggling. Um, and then by the end of a year, I was able to sit for like 3 or 4 hours, and it's still hard for me, but I like it. I don't know, like people, you like writing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I listen to people talking about writing, and they're like, I hate writing, it's the worst thing. And I'm like, they're writers, and I'm like, I really like it. Like, I mean, I'm not like the best, but I really like it.
I find that
So
the thing that's hardest for me, or what for a lot of people, is what's around writing. Like once they actually get into the writing,
yeah,
it feels juicy
yeah,
and alive and interesting. It's all the stuff around it. The like,
hmm,
I can't sit for more than 15 minutes. And like, I know you talk about this even in your book, like the feelings that come with our feelings, how we
yeah,
push ourselves, or the resistance. It seems like resistance is the part that's really painful,
yeah, for sure.
and the discipline or the devotion. And
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
how did, just thinking about, I mean, you shared so much there that we could go into, which is beautiful. But even just thinking about like starting it, so the first experience you had, you had all this judgment come up about yourself and your capabilities, and then you said, you can only start with like really micro moments, or just starting at like 10 minutes at a time, like that capacity. How did you build capacity? Like what helped for you, like to show up again
yeah.
and try again and build that muscle?
It's a good question. I mean, it's so funny because I tell people this whenever they want to learn something. Like, I'm like, if I wanted to run a marathon, I couldn't just wake up tomorrow and run it. Like, I'd have to put 3 or 4 months out, do a little bit every day. And I was telling someone else this. I'm like, can you imagine if babies had the self-talk that adults had when they're learning how to walk? Like, no baby would ever make it. Like, a baby would get up and be like, wait, Charles is already walking? Like, how long was he doing it? Like, comparison, comparison, comparison. And then the baby would be like, I'm never going to walk. I'm never going to do it. But it's like, not that I've been around a lot of babies, but it's like you watch them, they're always making micro adjustments. They're always learning, even every time they fall.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the mindset you have to have when you're an artist trying something new or even creating a project.
Yeah.
And I think two things were helpful, just like the act of showing up every day,
Yeah.
and no matter how I felt. And it's like, and I was pretty militant about it, like, at the same time every day. And I started small. I started with a half hour every day, and then when I built that tolerance up, then I went to an hour. And then when I built that tolerance up over like a week or two or a month, I went to an hour and a half. And then before I knew it, it was like 9 to noon when I was like in it. And then I think the other thing that helped was getting mindsets and perspectives from people who had already done it.
Mm.
So hearing either Stephen King or someone else be like, yeah, like the first draft is supposed to be terrible. And I think you told me that too. Like, yeah, like don't judge that, because like I'd write for, a week or two or a month, and then I look back and I'm like, ooh, this is awful. But then it's like, instead of judging that, just being like, well, how do you need to rewrite it? And I think that was something that never really hit me, as like, I took a David Sedaris masterclass and he talked about that of like, rewrite. He's like, I rewrite things like 9 or 10 times. And I was like, whoa. So then just having a perspective of like, okay, it's not supposed to be perfect the first time. It can be a mess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge thing I would love to just underline and put a couple of stars next to, is just normalizing the drafts. I remember even the first, not to get on my story, but the first author I ever talked to when I was a new author, when I was a new aspiring author, I talked to a man who told me that he had a really successful author. He told me he had rewritten his intro like 50 times. And that was
Whoa.
intimidating. I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
But it normalized that the reality that it takes lots of time, like lots of rounds of refinement and exploration
Yeah.
and articulation. And we often judge our first draft as if it's meant to be the last draft. And
Yeah.
we're actually quite different beings,
Yeah.
creatures. And we can't actually get to the later, more refined drafts without getting into the mess. People, other experts call it the shitty first draft, the stormy first draft. Like they're not meant to be good the first time they come out. They're just meant to come out.
Yeah.
And then we
Exactly.
refine. It's just like that kid who's taking his first step. Like it's not going to be a long runner's stride of an
Yeah.
adult. It's going to be this weird wobbly attempt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So I love
everyone's cheering them on.
that.
No one's like, why aren't you running yet? It's like, what?
This is the first time I've ever tried this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So
And
the
then like
mindset.
I read the Pixar, I think it was Ed Catmull's book about Pixar, and he said that every movie they've made has been terrible. And then they'd have to like rewrite it and remake it so it's something really good.
Yeah.
And when you think about Pixar, like those are some of the best polished movies ever. It's like hard to imagine. Like in the first Toy Story, like Woody was uh he was mean spirited and like had, bad attitude. And it's like you're like, what? And it's like that's how they wrote it. But
Yeah.
I tell people too, I'm like, as long as you get it on the page, even if it's bad, now you have something to work with.
Yeah.
like the place you don't want to be in is have all these ideas, but then they're all in your head and you don't have anything tangible to work with.
Yeah.
Because you can massage anything into being good. I know that with songs and music. I know that, with writing too, it's the same way. It's like you just get those basic ideas up and then you let it sit. Like some really good advice I went to a seminar with this guy that wrote all these Motown songs. And he said, someone asked, like, what happens if you get stuck in a song? He's like, oh, we put it down for a week and then come back to it with fresh perspective. And
Yeah.
I think writing is like that too. It's like you get it out, you get so in the woods, and then you just let it sit, and then you do something else, and then you come back to it, and you're like, oh, that's why it doesn't work, because this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I love that. I talk about